Hey everybody, welcome back to Almost Sideways, a place for movie conversation. My name is Adam, and today's conversation is from 2008. We're going back 15 years to talk about the first film in the MCU, Iron Man. I can't believe it's 15 years already. It's crazy that that film has kind of kicked off this big giant franchise that we kind of love movies, and we kind of talk about these superhero movies a lot now, and the MCU is a really fun time to have good conversations about. So of course, Iron Man, we need to have a conversation about this movie. And I did invite an awesome YouTuber. Make sure you check out all the links of his channel in the show notes down below. But that is Zach Milne Talks Movies.
Wow, thank you very much for that nice introduction. That was very nice of you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well, man. I'm really happy to have you on this conversation. I know that you've been commenting on some of our YouTube videos here, and I was like, well, I'm going to reach out to you. And I figured you probably like this movie as much as I do. So I figured this would be a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love this movie. I watched it not too long ago, actually.
Oh, nice.
So it was like perfect time, and it lined up well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it kind of works out. Well, the first thing when I was watching this a couple days ago, I realized that this is a kind of a perfect movie that came out in 2008 because it kind of embodied that year. Unlike any other MCU film, it definitely feels like it's time stamped in that period. With they mentioned MySpace, obviously there's like a war on in the beginning on the film too. It kind of embodied that 2008 period. Like unlike any other like MCU movie, I feel like this definitely is like stamped into that period of time. So first thoughts and takes on Iron Man there from you, Zach. What did you kind of feel like when you first watched the movie?
When I first watched it back in 2008, I was 9.
Oh, there we go.
So yeah, I was 9 years old. So this was actually a very influential movie on my life because my dad took me to it.
Nice.
And I wasn't that into comic book movies at the time. Like I liked the big blockbuster stuff. He usually took me to the big blockbuster stuff. And I still remember the day. Like, it's so funny to think back on it now because of how, like you said, the MCU is 15 years old. These characters are household names. I remember him saying to me, I've got 2 tickets to Iron Man tonight that we're going to go see. And just that question, who is Iron Man?
Yeah.
What is, I had no concept of what it was. I had no idea what it could be. And so I went with my dad and watched it. And at the time, like, you know, I'd seen like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I think I had seen 1 or 2 of the X-Men films at that time. But it was different. It felt different. Like my little brain at 9 years old couldn't comprehend how different it was. But I just remember being infatuated by it because it was such a different hero journey than I had ever seen before. Tony Stark was just so unique. Robert Downey Jr. just nailed it from the start. And yeah, it was definitely like, it was like everyone's gateway into the MCU, but it was like my gateway into like loving these comic book movies.
Well, that's pretty cool. I love having those memories and times that you could go with your parents to go see a movie and then you just kind of get swept into the magic of the whole thing. I remember watching this movie actually at a drive-in movie theater over here in Washington and absolutely had a blast with it. I was about 19 to 20 years old around there when it came out. And when we were sitting in our back, the trunk of our car at that time, because that's how we watched drive-in movies over here. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I remember the other movie that I was paired with, but we were talking. I'm like, oh, we'll go see this movie, and because it looked pretty cool from the trailer and everything. And when we got to like the end credit sequence, I was like, oh my gosh! And my brain started rattling because moving because at the time a very popular video game that I loved a lot was Marvel Ultimate Alliance for the Xbox, and I was basically a big old team up movie or team up video game there too, and seeing that that they possibly could go down that route and make an Avengers movie was really fascinating. I was kind of excited. I wasn't like you said, I wasn't a huge like comic book fan. Like I liked my Batman, I liked my Spider-Man, even like my X-Men movies, and at that time I was really kind of a big film nerd too. So I was like buying a lot, like a bunch of DVDs and stuff like that for my collection, and it was a good time to be kind of like get into the movie scape as well, because 2008 was a huge year for comic book movies. Three really great ones came out: Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, and The Dark Knight. So a huge year for comic book movies. So pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. It was it was a great year for sure.
Yeah, rewatching it several times. I'm sure you've watched quite a bit because of how prominent the MCU is. What's your kind of thought? Do you think that Robert Downey Jr. is like the perfect person for that role?
It's funny you asked that, actually, because last time I watched it, one of the thoughts that really stuck out to me is like he really owned it
Yeah.
from the start. Like, even if you look back at like Captain America, Chris Evans did great in First Avenger.
Mhm.
I think he still had to grow into the character when I think he
Yeah,
found it in like
exactly.
Winter Soldier.
Mhm.
Even Chris Hemsworth's Thor, I feel like he found it more so around, I don't
Ragnarok.
know, or Ragnarok. Yeah, I was gonna say Age of Ultron, but probably more Ragnarok.
Well, actually, that's probably a
Um,
good call. The Avengers movies. Yeah, that's a good call.
yeah, but when it came to Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, like from the start till Endgame, I feel like he just owned it. Like you're looking at Tony Stark,
Mhm.
and he just seemed to have such a grasp on the character from the minute he stepped into frame into this movie. Like the minute you see him in that car with the army men, you
Yeah.
like he just nailed it.
Yeah, he had the quick wit to him. I think that is pretty, but spot on thoughts there too, because I'm right there with you. I feel like Robert Downey was able to translate some of his personal demons that he was going through. Because I remember some of the stuff that he was going through back in the day too. I remember seeing like stuff on Entertainment Tonight with him, and because he was an Ally McBeal a little bit as well. So seeing some of that personal stuff, and then seeing how he got this role, and they took a gamble on him to put him front and center as a kind of a superhero. But a lot of
Yep.
his demons were able to translate onto the big screen, and so he was able to like maybe riff off of that a little bit and kind of fit perfectly in it. And I can't really picture anybody else being Iron Man or Tony Stark because just how kind of the perfect situation that he got put into, and it also helped change his life probably for the better as well because he's moving forward and not making those same mistakes that he did in the past, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even know about any of that when I watched the movie
Yeah.
either. Like, I don't think I learned about his past until I think he was doing the interviews for Civil War, and
Mhm.
that like interview guy asked him, and he like was like, "Okay, we're done, bye," and walked out.
Well, I'm just asking questions. That's all.
Right.
I mean,
Bye.
are you? I'm sorry.
And then I remember finding out like people were like, "What did this mean? Here's what it means. Here's Robert Downey Jr.'s past." And I remember finding videos and articles
Yeah.
about that. But when I first saw this in 2008, it was just like this new guy, never seen him before. It was
Yeah.
so easy as a kid to buy into him as Iron Man. Like just see him as Tony Stark and nothing else.
Yeah. I think that's probably the best way to see it, because when you sometimes being a little older too is like when you see somebody pop into a role, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. Oh yeah, he works kind of well in this now. So it's pretty like now kids, like I think Robert Pattinson is another one that I could see that people growing up watching the Batman movie will never
Mhm.
know that he was also in Twilight unless they get brought that that attention. So
Right.
you get a lot of that kind of, and like Ben Affleck as Batman too, got a lot of hate on Ben Affleck when he first got casted, but then he comes in and everybody loves him now. But you're seeing like a lot of the past getting kind of judging what the present is at times too with some of these castings. But Robert Downey Jr. was pretty spot on, and I think Jon Favreau had a lot to do with that too. He kind of vouched for him and
Yep.
put him in
I had
this
to fight
movie,
for
and
him.
yeah, fought for him. And Jon Favreau is kind of a perfect a little indie director that got put in a big situation where he was kicking off an MCU. He's kicked off some Star Wars projects as well, and yeah, I can't picture another director like Jon Favreau stepping into this position and having the world kind of open up to the comic book genre as well as it did.
Yeah, absolutely. And this movie, one of the strengths of it too is that it doesn't overdo it with the world building. I
Yeah.
mean, the real only thing they really do that would carry forward is introduce Agent Coulson
Mhm.
and drop the seed of Shield. And yeah,
Yeah.
you have the post credit scene with Samuel Jackson, but like my dad, like when we saw it, he didn't like expect that, so we didn't even see that. Like we just left the theater before that. I think it wasn't until Avengers was coming out that I actually heard about the post credit scene because people were
Yeah.
talking about it on a YouTube video and like how did the Avengers come to be? And I was like, there was a post credit scene in Iron
Yeah.
Man,
Like what?
like what?
Yeah. So I remember I remember X-Men The Last Stand actually had a post-credit scene in that film. And so I didn't during that it came out before a couple years before Iron Man. So I remember hearing about it online. Then I went bought another ticket just to watch a 5 minute, like a little like a minute clip, and then I'd be like, "That's what I bought my ticket for."
That's disappointing, man. That was not
It's
a good post credit
disappointing.
scene.
Yeah, I was like, "What?" And I was like, I didn't realize this was like a huge thing that was going to be kind of like ingrained in our film going experience moving forward. So this like little stinger at the very end of the movie was something that I wasn't expecting either for Iron Man. I was like, I didn't know they were going to do anything else after that. So if I wasn't at the drive-in that night, I probably wouldn't have seen it. So that's pretty good to go from there. But now obviously like everything's ingrained in us. We need to stay for the entire credits for any MCU project, with a few exceptions. Like I don't think Incredible Hulk has one. I don't think Avengers Endgame has one.
Is the Robert Downey Jr. walk-in at the end of Incredible Hulk, is that in the credits or is that at the end of the movie? I can't.
That's right before the credits roll. So
okay.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that's going to be another episode later on. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So perfect. But I think I haven't watched it quite yet, but I remember that I believe that's right before the credits roll. So it would have been perfect. That would have been probably perfect if it was at the very end, because that would have just been fitting.
Yeah.
But who knows who would have stayed behind, because the Incredible Hulk hasn't really got a whole lot of love. The Hulk movies don't get a whole lot of love. But anyway, you did mention Agent Coulson. I do want to let's talk about him for a little bit too. The small introduction of Shield, I think it's really doesn't play a huge role. He's such a minor character in this film, but it also sets him up to be kind of a really liked character, because he has a lot of that kind of subtle dialogue to him that it comes across rather humorous, because I know how the character progresses in the other films. So it's really cool to see Agent Coulson pop up here as well. So what's your take on him?
Yeah, no, I think they used him really well, especially for phase 1. He was definitely the glue that was holding the movies together.
Yep.
And his introduction in this, I think, is great. There's like this like dryness to him and to his humor, but you get the impression that he's a pretty awesome agent. And there's something about the way that I want to say it's Clark Gregg or Greg Clark. I think
Clark
it's Clark Gregg.
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah, there's something about the way that he plays him that is oddly captivating to me. I thought he did a great job.
It's a great point. He's rather dry, and deadpan, but it's perfect delivery for his character in that. So it's definitely one of the great minor characters of the MCU. For sure.
Yeah, it's like that little moment too at when they're going to infiltrate the building where Ironmonger is, and they put the device on the door, and he just walks to
great point. Yeah,
crosses his arms and just waits for it to explode. Like there's just something about that. It's like, yeah, this guy is seasoned. He knows what he's doing. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's great. That there's a little mannerisms like that, and like little crossing the arms is like, that's pretty awesome. And Pepper's like, oh crap, like just freaks out right there. It's like, yeah, he knew what he expected. It's always cool when stuff blows up behind you and you can just have a great reaction. So that's one of the great reactions of something blowing up behind him. Perfect. What's one of your favorite moments of the Iron Man movie?
Definitely when he's in the cave building the suit. I love that. Like they wouldn't do a scene like that in the MCU today, or at least like it doesn't feel like they would. It's just the way that they just let that sit for a while and build the character and show, not tell. You see how Tony's changing in that cave with the ensign. I love all that stuff, and it gets a little like, you get darker moments in there too, like when they're like waterboarding him or whatever, because he won't build the missile. Like you really get the dire situation that this guy is in, and if he doesn't get out, if he doesn't make this suit, and if it doesn't work, like he's screwed. And I remember as a kid, especially that scene, especially like I was saying in like a comic book movie, was just so captivating to me. It was like, this is so different. Like there's no action. He's not even in the superhero suit, but I'm so interested in what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's why I feel like this movie is perfect for like 2008, because we were clearly at a time in our country too where we were at kind of at war too. At a point we had military overseas, so it fits perfectly into that. You could actually see this probably happening in real life as well, and having those like waterboard sequences where they're basically torturing him to try to get him to build this missile, the Jericho missile. And he's like, I'm going to switch it on its head. I'm going to make this suit to get the heck out of here. It's like a really real world situations in a comic book film. Definitely, I don't see this ever happening, because they don't like having the suit up scenes in Marvel movies anymore, it seems. So it's like tech all the way. Yay. But it's just those little suit up moments are some of the best moments in movies, especially these Marvel ones too. And I liked that sequence a lot. You got like you got Black Sabbath playing over with Iron Man, their song there, and the dun 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 dun. I love it. I can't think of that like a better song. It's kind of perfect that the song is called Iron Man as well, so it's played perfectly. And Black Sabbath is an awesome band too, so it's great to have them in there. But one of my favorite moments in this is when you get to see a forgotten character in this movie, War Machine. Terrence Howard's version of Rhodey, and his interaction when you see that the first time like Tony Stark goes out for the fly, and then he blows up the little all those missiles and weapons for this one area. And there's a conversation between Tony Stark and Rhodey over the phone. They're like, "Wait, is that you?" And then like the jets are after him too. I think that's just a really fun comedic moment there, back and forth camaraderie there. And it's kind of a bummer we didn't get to see much more of Terrence Howard outside of this movie. But I'm wondering if they're going to bring him back for the Avengers King Dynasty or Secret Wars. I think that would be kind of interesting.
That would be so trippy. But yeah, no, like that scene that you mentioned there is also a great example of like why this movie works. It's grounded to a point where it's believable. Like a conversation like that where he's testing and the air team comes out because it's an unidentified object coming towards the United States. Like, we're a little terrified of that. Like, that's so believable. That would happen in our world. And it just, those little bits of realism that they put into this movie just makes it more grounded and believable to me.
Yeah, I think in having a movie that it is in that comic book genre, but it is very grounded in reality because it's kind of a risk. Iron Man is not necessarily an A-list like superhero at that time. He was pretty much like B or C level because he was kind of a supporting character. Now they're going to put all the weight of what they're planning on doing because they had that stinger filmed already. So if this movie failed, who knows if the MCU would have actually moved forward. I'm sure they would have probably bounced it off somewhere else, but it's very interesting to see that they took a gamble on this character with actors and directors that aren't, they're going through their own thing that are not well known, and seeing them and how far the MCU has come since then. It's pretty remarkable that what they were able to do here.
Yeah, the underdogs that took over the movie world, basically.
Pretty much, and that's why I think that he's a GOAT. He's one of the greatest of all time for the comic book genre. It's definitely one of those characters that you remember, and you think he has a really great performance there too. Robert Downey really evolved Tony Stark's character. But there's other characters here too. We haven't talked about Jeff Bridges yet. How about takes on him at his villain persona?
I like him. I don't think he's like a super strong villain. That's one of the things with this movie too, is that it's famously been like stated that they kind of wrote on the spot a couple times when making this movie. They didn't fully have the script worked out. I feel like Obadiah Stane's story, you can see the cracks there as to how they probably were like, Obadiah Stane, he worked with the guys that kidnapped Tony. That works, right? Yeah. Like this is like it's like his turn, I think, is great though, the way that Jeff Bridges plays it. I think he's very menacing and intimidating when he's got Tony Stark under that device and he's like paralyzed and can't move. And I think that's a great performance. He's a lot of fun to watch. And especially like as a kid, I loved the fight at the end between the two Iron Man. That was so much fun. And not the strongest villain, not maybe the most memorable villain in the MCU, but I thought he was a solid kickoff and worked well for this movie.
I think Jeff Bridges is a kind of a really good, talented actor too. So watching him and seeing how menacing he is here, it's pretty awesome. Like my favorite line that how he delivers it's awesome. He's like, "Tony made this with a box of scraps."
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
That was like a perfect delivery of that line. But yeah, Obadiah Stone, he doesn't have like a huge, like the biggest arc or anything like that. And he is, menacing to a point, but it's not the greatest performance that we've seen. Especially there's been so many more villains in the MCU now that have kind of raised the bar what the standard should be. And but I think it is interesting though. I think I remember reading that Jeff Bridges said that one of the original cuts was when they opened up the Ironmonger's suit, he wouldn't have been sitting in there. He like escaped it, and he was like still alive. Like that was one of the original cuts. I'm like, that would have been interesting to see what they would have done there, but they killed him off instead. That was like what they just decided to do, I guess. But it would be interesting to see how he would. What would happen if he would like lived past this movie? And he takes on anything else on his character?
Well, I think that's interesting that they originally planned to keep him alive, because now I'm thinking like, oh, he could have showed up in like Armor Wars. That would have been kind of cool,
Yeah.
because whenever they haven't really done that, especially in the early phases. Like eventually they brought back Red Skull, I guess, in Infinity War, but he didn't have like a major role. They're pretty
Abomination too.
famous or infamous for killing off their villains right away. But it is interesting to the thought of what would happen if Obadiah Stane stuck around.
Yeah, I think definitely like probably Armor Wars. He could show up there. Like if they don't get Justin Hammer to show up in Armor Wars, I'd be kind of disappointed as well. I think that would have been kind of interesting to see that from Iron Man 2, Sam Rockwell's character in that movie. But one thing too, I was rewatching some old trailers when this movie came out. They spoiled the big like villain twist in the movie.
Really?
They show Obadiah Stane working with the Seven Rings in the trailer for a little snippet. I was like, huh. Like I never picked up on that. I was like, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, go back and watch the trailer. They actually show that conversation with him and the Seven Rings. That's pretty kind of funny. Like no one caught on to that or were aware. I was actually surprised that he actually turned on Tony Stark in the movie. I was like, oh whoa, that was my first time watching it. So I was kind of surprised by it, even though it's kind of telegraphed that was going to be the villain, because who else were they going to introduce 50 minutes into the movie to be the villain? Be kind of weird, but yeah, this movie does make you want to get a cheeseburger though. I can definitely tell you that.
Yeah.
Get some cheeseburgers. What other some moments here that you kind of stands out when you think about Iron Man that really kind of like, this is what I think about when I think of this movie?
The first flight test.
Yeah.
That stands out when he first suits up in it's all silver. Is it the Mark II or I can't remember? But yeah, he's like got the all silver suit on, and he goes and does that first flight. Like that's like one of those like movie magical moments to me. You know, like that's just the way they execute that, and they really capture the like intensity of the speed when he's flying around, and like they do things in that sequence that shows you the danger as well that comes with this. Like when he goes too high and he ices up and falls down.
Perfect,
like there's a lot about that sequence I just really love that they did.
Yeah, great little moments too, because as Tony's really smart, so he's like learning from these little moments to like enhance the suit, and we see that throughout his like journey as Iron Man. But yeah, that first flight was awesome. I like the little robotic arm too that helps him out with stuff, and like crashes through the building, and then like the funny moment of the fire extinguisher, like getting him spraying him like way too late with the fire extinguisher, was great parts of comedic moments that Jon Favreau has in his movies too. So they don't like beat you over the head with the comedy and jokes and stuff like that, but it's really like more physical humor at times, and it's pretty awesome that first flight. There's a lot of great little moments there too.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I love just watching Tony Stark tinker with it. You know, like tinker with his with his suit and making it better and fixing things here and there. Because we got to a point in Infinity War, it's all nanotech now, it's all CGI, and you just don't get that anymore in the MCU. And I love watching him go back and like actually have to physically work on the suit. I just think those are really fun sequences that I wish that they would like do more of in the MCU.
Yeah. That is a great point. Yeah, I wish they would focus more on those suit up moments, like even like moments where like Ant-Man's like putting on a helmet or something like that. But now it's all nanotech, and it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, I kind of like the physical, like the suit and stuff like that too. Is that it makes it more believable at times as well. So,
and the practicality of it too, like especially in this movie, there's so much practical stuff with the suits going on. Like they have a great, I think it's like 3-part documentary on the Blu-ray, and like they built a lot of these suits and they had to test them and put them on, and it's just it's tangible, you know, and that's different than just a full mocap suit and CGI suit on top of it. Like you can feel the difference, and I just think that's really cool. Like when it gets scratched and the paint comes off, like it just looks cool. I love that stuff.
Yeah, everything practical effects always beats physical effects or visual effects. I mean, so it's always like the magic of making something and having it there and kind of slowly deteriorate before our eyes is in a physical way. It's like pretty awesome. I that's why like the old Star Wars movies like are still praised today, because a lot of that stuff was like all practical effects.
Yeah.
And the new visual effects are, can be tarnished a little bit. I know that MCU is kind of, there's a lot of shots now in the MCU films like Black Widow and some other ones too that the visual effects are really like glaringly bad, and obviously they're on the green screen, so it doesn't have that same appeal or magic feeling as like these first like generation of MCU movies. So
Yeah, no, I agree.
do you think that Iron Man's coming back, Robert Downey Jr. specifically?
I don't want him to. I think that would be a bad decision. I want to believe that the answer is no.
Yeah, I want to believe it too. I just that there's a big movie coming out though. That's Secret Wars. I just have a feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it would be cheap. I feel like it would be cheap to bring in a multiverse Iron Man. And I don't understand how, like, there's been people online talking about like recasting him, which I don't understand at all, to be honest. If you're gonna keep it in the same universe, he's dead. You don't just recast a dead guy. So I don't really know how it would work, but there will be a day where they reboot the Iron Man franchise. There will be a day, but I don't want it to be Robert Downey Jr. and I don't want it to be anytime soon.
Yeah, don't want to be anytime soon either. I was kind of nervous and excited when Doctor Strange 2 came out, because there was that rumor that Tom Cruise was in it as Iron Man or Tony Stark, which was the original idea for this movie to begin with, was Tom Cruise as Iron Man, Tony Stark, which, no. That would have been nuts. But I was kind of excited for it, but then I remembered, he's doing Mission Impossible stuff and, Top Gun stuff. So he can't really do that.
Yeah. The writer, I remember he came out and said that they did approach him though. He was just too busy. So it was like, it almost happened, which is crazy.
Yeah, it would have been kind of nuts though. But I can see in a world where they probably bring him back as like a Jarvis type of character, computer, some kind of voiceover type of role or something like that. I could see that happening at some point. I just don't want him to be on screen again. But I can have also at the same time, as if the MCU starts like plummeting in money, what's the biggest thing they could do? Bring back Robert Downey Jr. Like that's where I could see, and I don't want that to happen.
That would come across to me as a desperate move. I wouldn't be excited to hear that.
No. All right. Well, overall though, what's your takes on the Iron Man franchise and the Iron Man character in general? Is he one of the goats of the MCU? Is he one, like, when you think of the MCU, that's who you think of, or do you think of somebody else?
Yeah, I think that's the face of the MCU still. I think that is the granddaddy of the MCU.
Yep.
I think it's still the best character arc overall that we've had in the MCU. Just to see where he began, how he was, and where he ended, and who he was when he ended is just a beautiful arc. It was perfect. It was exactly how I wanted to see this character journey go, and it went perfectly. And it could honestly be a lightning in a bottle situation for the MCU, to be honest. I don't know if they're in a position, at least right now, where they're going to have any character arc complete from start to finish as beautifully as Iron Man's did.
Yeah, I think the only one that they could say that's close, but not really close, is Captain America. Like his arc, but he was pretty mobile.
That was a nice ending too.
It's a nice ending for his character, but I don't really see how Thor's ending is going to happen. And of course, the Guardians are probably ending pretty soon too. And I just don't see the entire arcs of these characters being nearly as great as Tony Stark's Iron Man character. So I think Robert Downey Jr. is definitely considered the GOAT. And that's why we're talking about like not bringing him back, because keep him dead. Make there's some actual stakes to the franchise. Like the only character they have kept dead is some of the villains and Aaron Taylor Johnson's Silver Surfer.
Yeah, it's finality. Like we need finality in these franchises more nowadays. Like it would feel almost as desperate to me as it felt when they brought back Palpatine for episode 9. It was you feel like there's a problem and you're trying to fix it with a fan pop, a cheap pop in the movie that doesn't make any sense. And even in the movie yourself, you explain it doesn't make any sense. Just somehow it happened. I feel like that would be the same with Iron Man. It'd be like, the MCU has definitely gone downhill. They are desperate. They're bringing back Robert Downey Jr. Like, great ending. Just let it be.
Yeah,
just let it be.
Great take on that. I think that's the perfect way to kind of wrap up our conversation of 2008's Iron Man, directed by Jon Favreau, starring Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow. We didn't even mention her, but she's awesome as Pepper.
Oh
here
yeah,
as
she's
well.
great. I love their relationship in this movie. Very sweet.
A little seeds planting on seeing the over arc of there, because that's another character that had a pretty good arc as well. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, anyway, make sure you guys follow Zach Milne on YouTube, Twitter, all that fun stuff. Again, all his socials are going to be in the show notes down below. If you guys are new here and you haven't listened to my stuff, hit that subscribe button if you find you want a place for movie conversations. So yeah, that'd be a great time. Join both of us on our conversations. So without further ado, thank you so much, Zach, and we will see
Thank you.
next time.